What happens when the world's richest man's son has a life-changing encounter with a spiritual leader? Xavier Musk sat in a plush chair inside the Vatican's secretive chambers, his fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. The vast marble walls, adorned with ancient art, felt like they were closing in on him. He wasn't used to this kind of silence, this kind of stillness. He had been in rooms with billionaires, innovators, and CEOs, but nothing had ever felt quite like this. His father, Elon Musk, the genius behind Tesla, SpaceX, and a billion-dollar empire, had always lived his life under the watchful eyes of the world. And, in turn, Xavier had learned to live under those same bright, blinding lights. But today, in the heart of Rome, Xavier was far from the Silicon Valley hustle. He was about to meet someone who, unlike his father, didn't care about wealth, power, or prestige. Someone who could see beyond the surface. A door creaked open, and the soft, measured voice of a man broke the heavy silence. "Xavier, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," said Pope Francis, his eyes filled with warmth. He was an old man, with a tired smile, but his presence commanded a sense of calm that immediately put Xavier at ease. Xavier stood up, a mix of awe and disbelief sweeping over him. "Your Holiness, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I wasn't sure if this was even possible." "Everything is possible, Xavier," Pope Francis replied with a smile that didn't seem forced but genuine. "The real question is, what are you seeking?" Xavier hesitated for a moment. What was he seeking? He wasn't sure. Perhaps guidance, perhaps a sign that there was more to life than the endless cycle of achievement and public acclaim. He had everything that anyone could want. He lived in a mansion, drove luxury cars, and had the finest education money could buy. But lately, he had been wondering about the emptiness that lingered beneath the surface. "I don't know, really," Xavier admitted. "I've been trying to figure out my place in the world. People expect a lot from me, and, sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough." The Pope gestured for him to sit back down. Xavier obeyed, his nerves still palpable. Pope Francis sat across from him, his gaze steady. "What do they expect of you, Xavier?" the Pope asked, his voice soft but firm. Xavier paused, thinking about it. "They expect me to be a businessman, a mogul, a copy of my father. To carry on the family name, to be successful in all the ways that matter to them." But Xavier wasn't sure that any of that mattered to him anymore. His father, Elon Musk, had always been a larger-than-life figure, someone who changed the world with a tweet or a new invention. Everyone around Xavier looked at him as the next in line, but he wasn't sure that path was one he wanted to follow. "They expect me to follow in my father's footsteps. To keep building, to keep innovating. They think that's the only way to be successful." "And what do you think?" Pope Francis asked, his tone almost like a challenge. Xavier let out a deep breath, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion. "I don't know. I feel like I'm being pulled in so many different directions. Sometimes it feels like I'm just a reflection of everyone else's expectations. I don't know who I am, beyond being Elon Musk's son." The Pope nodded, his face showing a rare, knowing expression. "It's not uncommon to feel lost, Xavier. But remember this, your worth is not determined by what others expect of you or how much wealth you accumulate. It's not about your father's name or your status. Your true value is defined by how you live, how you love, and how you help others." Xavier felt a weight settle in his chest. He wasn't sure why, but the Pope's words seemed to pierce through the walls he had built around himself. Live, love, help. It sounded so simple, yet in his world, those things were often overshadowed by the pursuit of success. But here, in the heart of the Vatican, it felt like a radical idea. Could his life be more than just a series of achievements? The Pope continued, his voice calm but resolute. "I see many people who are rich in material things but poor in spirit. They have the world's treasures, but they lack the one thing that truly matters, peace of mind and a purpose that comes from serving others." Xavier felt a lump in his throat. Peace of mind. He had heard those words before, but they had always seemed like a luxury, something for people who didn't have the weight of the world on their shoulders. But now, in this moment, it felt like a possibility. You've been blessed with many things, Xavier, the Pope said gently. But the greatest blessing is to find joy in the simple things, to find joy in helping others, and to find joy in being true to yourself. Xavier's mind raced. This wasn't the answer he had expected. He had come to the Pope looking for a new business strategy, a way to find success in a world that demanded more from him than he could give. Instead, he was being asked to redefine success entirely. It felt both freeing and terrifying at the same time. The Pope smiled, sensing Xavier's inner turmoil. It's not easy, what I'm asking. It's much simpler to chase after things that will never truly fulfill you. But in the end, happiness isn't found in what you have, it's found in who you become. For the first time in years, Xavier felt a flicker of hope. He had always admired his father's genius, his drive to innovate, to push the boundaries of what was possible. But now, he was beginning to question whether it was the right path for him. Maybe it's not about becoming someone else. Maybe it's about becoming who I'm meant to be. The Pope's words echoed in his mind as the meeting came to a close. Before Xavier stood up, the Pope placed a hand on his shoulder. Remember, Xavier, true greatness comes from kindness, humility, and the love we give to others. It is not measured by what you own, but by what you share. As Xavier left the Vatican, he felt as if the world had shifted just slightly. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do with all of this new knowledge, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the brink of something different, something deeper. The life-changing answer that Pope Francis had given him was more than just advice, it was an invitation to rediscover who he was and what truly mattered. And as the Vatican doors closed behind him, Xavier made a silent promise to himself, I will find out what it means to live with purpose. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Xavier Musk had never been just Xavier. He had always been the son of Elon Musk, a title that came with expectations no child could ever truly escape. From an early age, he had been thrust into a world where achievements weren't just celebrated, they were demanded. His father, Elon, was known for revolutionizing entire industries, space travel, electric cars, even the way humanity thought about technology. It was impossible to stand next to someone like that without feeling the weight of their legacy. Growing up in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Los Angeles, Xavier had every luxury that money could buy. He had the finest education, the most advanced technology at his fingertips, and a constant stream of fascinating people passing through the halls of their home. CEOs, engineers, inventors, celebrities, all people who had one thing in common. They were successful, and they were always looking for the next big thing. But amid all the grandeur and innovation, Xavier had never felt truly seen. He was the quiet one, the one who shied away from the spotlight, who found solace in his own thoughts rather than in the hustle and bustle of his father's world. Elon was a visionary, constantly working toward bigger goals, goals that demanded attention, admiration, and, most importantly, success. But Xavier had always felt like an afterthought in that grand vision. Unlike his siblings, who seemed perfectly content to follow in Elon's footsteps, Xavier had never been able to fully embrace the pressure. He loved the idea of innovation, of technology changing the world for the better, but something about it felt distant. He had never found the same drive that fueled his father. He wasn't interested in launching rockets into space or creating self-driving cars. Those dreams felt like his father's, not his own. Xavier had tried, he really had. For years, he attended all the family meetings, the boardroom discussions, the strategy sessions, but something always felt off. He often found himself lost in thought while the adults around him talked about future projects. He felt disconnected from it all. There was a void, one that seemed to grow wider the older he got. His relationship with his father was complicated, to say the least. Elon Musk was a brilliant, sometimes difficult man. His singular focus on changing the world left little room for anything else. Xavier had always been proud of his father's accomplishments, but he also couldn't help but feel like he had to compete for his attention. When he was younger, he would try to impress Elon with his own ideas, his own inventions, but the results were often disappointing. Elon's eyes would light up when someone mentioned SpaceX's latest rocket launch or a new Tesla model. But when Xavier tried to pitch a new idea for an app or a social media platform, it was like his father's attention would drift off, already thinking about the next big challenge. As a teenager, Xavier began to withdraw further. He spent more time alone in his room, reading books on philosophy and psychology, trying to figure out who he was apart from the legacy of Musk. He had friends, but they didn't understand the unique pressures he faced. At school, he was treated like a celebrity, but it was more of a curiosity than genuine connection. People didn't want to get to know Xavier, they wanted to be close to his father. The weight of living under that shadow grew heavier every year. Xavier wasn't interested in public accolades or the constant media attention that came with being a Musk. He longed for simplicity, an escape from the pressures that surrounded him every day. He wanted to be seen for who he was, not just as an extension of his father's brilliance. Then there was the matter of love. Xavier had had a few relationships over the years, but nothing that had ever lasted. His partners often seemed more interested in his family's wealth than in him as a person. He found himself unable to fully open up, always fearing that any connection he made would be tainted by his last name. No matter how genuine the feelings were, he couldn't escape the feeling that they weren't truly his. Still, he tried to make it work. He tried to be what everyone expected him to be. He enrolled in college, studied business, and even interned at Tesla for a while, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he could find something that would make him feel like he belonged. But with each passing year, the sense of emptiness grew. He was doing all the things he was supposed to do, but it felt more like an act than an authentic life. The pressure, the scrutiny, the constant expectation of greatness, it all became too much to handle. And then there was the constant reminder that his father was always more. More successful, more driven, more visionary. Every achievement that Xavier had ever made felt insignificant compared to Elon's. He had grown up seeing his father as a giant, and it felt impossible to measure up. Every time he failed, or even succeeded in something small, it felt like the world was waiting for him to do something truly great, like his father had. But despite everything, despite all the accolades and achievements that seemed to flood in from every corner of his life, Xavier still couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something missing. Something inside him that couldn't be fixed with money, success, or fame. One night, in the midst of another sleepless stretch, Xavier found himself staring out at the city skyline from his penthouse window. The lights of Los Angeles twinkled below him, but it felt like he was trapped in a world of glass and steel, isolated from the real world. He had everything he could ever want, and yet, it all felt meaningless. It was during one of these sleepless nights that he first heard about Pope Francis. His mother, May, had mentioned him in passing, talking about his humility and his outreach to the poor and marginalized. Xavier, curious, began reading about the Pope's life, his work, and his philosophy. For the first time in years, something sparked within him. The Pope's message was one of love, humility, and service, values that seemed so foreign in the world Xavier had grown up in, but also strangely comforting. It wasn't long before Xavier made the decision. He would go to Rome, to the Vatican, and seek out Pope Francis. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for, maybe guidance, maybe an answer to the emptiness that had defined his life for so long. But he knew that it was a chance for something different, something that wasn't tied to wealth, power, or the Musk name. And so, after months of preparation, the meeting was arranged. As he sat in that room, waiting for Pope Francis to enter, Xavier felt a strange sense of calm. Perhaps this was the moment that could change everything. Maybe, just maybe, he would find the answers he had been searching for all his life. The Vatican was a place that exuded history and quiet reverence. But as Xavier stepped into the ornate chambers where he would meet Pope Francis, a different feeling tugged at him. It was a sense of tension, almost as if the grand weight of centuries of tradition and faith were bearing down on him. His life had always been about achievement, recognition, and the unrelenting drive for more. And now, standing in a room that seemed timeless, it was as if the walls themselves were urging him to reevaluate everything. The Pope's words from their previous meeting lingered in Xavier's mind: true greatness comes from kindness, humility, and the love we give to others. At first, those words had felt soothing, almost like a balm to the chaos of his life. But as the days passed after the meeting, doubt began to creep in. Was this advice really practical? Could he really abandon everything he had worked for, the life of innovation, the fast-paced world that had defined him, to chase after something as intangible as kindness and humility? Xavier couldn't shake the feeling that he was caught in an impossible bind. His father, Elon Musk, was a man who valued one thing above all else: progress. Success was a never-ending race to push the boundaries of what was possible, to leap higher, run faster, and break new records. Xavier had always admired his father for his boundless energy and singular vision. He had grown up watching him create, change, and inspire, but it was always with an eye on the future. Elon's vision was shaped by what could be, not necessarily what was. But now, in the aftermath of his encounter with Pope Francis, Xavier found himself questioning whether his own future would even align with his father's ideals. Was he destined to follow Elon's footsteps down a path of relentless ambition? Was it enough to live a life dictated by goals and outcomes? Or was there more to his existence than simply achieving? His friends, his colleagues, and even his own family had always made it clear what was expected of him. There was an unspoken pressure to continue the Musk legacy, to become the next great mind, the next innovator, the next Elon. Xavier had always wondered what that would feel like, to have the kind of power that came with changing the world, but now, after meeting Pope Francis, he wasn't so sure anymore. What did it really mean to change the world? Was it about the future of technology and space, or was it about something deeper? Something that couldn't be measured in numbers or accolades. Over the following weeks, Xavier became increasingly torn. He was still drawn to the excitement and possibilities that came with the world of technology. The idea of being part of a groundbreaking new venture, creating something that could change lives, still called to him. Yet, the more he thought about his conversation with the Pope, the more he realized that he couldn't ignore the other side of the equation, who he was becoming in the process. He found himself feeling torn between two opposing forces: the pull of his father's legacy, which promised glory and unending success, and the pull of his newfound awareness that there was more to life than achievement. Xavier had always been known as the quiet one in the family, the one who kept his head down, avoided the media, and stayed out of the spotlight. But the more he thought about what Pope Francis had said, the more he realized that perhaps there was something in his quietness that could serve a larger purpose. Yet, even as these thoughts swirled in his mind, there was a deep fear that refused to go away. What if the life he was considering, the one of humility, kindness, and service, wasn't enough? What if it meant giving up everything that had made him feel important, powerful, and relevant? Could he truly live a life that didn't revolve around wealth and influence? Xavier's confusion reached a boiling point when he received a call from his father. Elon had been busy with one of his many ventures, as usual, but his voice on the other end was warm and fatherly, a rare occurrence in their typical business-centric conversations. "Xavier, I need you to come to the office," Elon said, his tone straightforward, though not dismissive. "There's something important I want to talk to you about. It's a new project, something I believe could change everything." Xavier's heart sank. Another new project. His father's ambitions never stopped, and the idea of another venture was both exciting and daunting. He knew that whatever his father was about to propose would once again challenge him to be more, to do more. And he was beginning to wonder if he had it in him to keep up. "Of course, Dad. I'll be there soon," Xavier said, trying to mask the uncertainty in his voice. As he arrived at the Tesla headquarters, the usual flurry of activity surrounded him. Engineers and designers scurried from one meeting to the next, talking about rocket launches, electric vehicles, and innovations that could shape the future of humanity. Everything around him was designed to drive one message home: success is measured by progress. Elon greeted him with a firm handshake, his eyes alight with excitement. "Xavier, I've been working on something big. I want you to be a part of it. We're planning to revolutionize the way energy is distributed globally. This is going to be a game changer." Xavier listened as his father detailed his grand vision: a global network of clean energy solutions that would change the way people lived, powered by revolutionary technology. It was all so typical of Elon, the same bold, world-changing ideas that had built his empire. But as his father spoke, Xavier's mind wandered back to the quiet room in the Vatican, to Pope Francis's words. "True greatness comes from kindness, humility, and service." "Dad, this sounds incredible," Xavier said, his voice betraying a trace of hesitation. "But I've been thinking a lot about the bigger picture lately. About what kind of impact I want to have, not just through technology, but through the way I live. I'm wondering if there's more to life than just building things." Elon paused, clearly taken aback. His gaze softened, though his expression remained serious. "You're not thinking of walking away from everything, are you? I understand the pressure you're under, Xavier, but you have to know, the world needs people like us to drive it forward. You've got what it takes to change lives, to change the course of history. Don't waste that." Xavier felt the weight of his father's words sink deep into his chest. He had always respected Elon's vision, but now it felt different. It felt like an ultimatum, a challenge to either embrace his father's world or walk away. Could he ever truly live up to Elon's expectations, knowing that there was another path, one of kindness and service, waiting for him? As he left the meeting, Xavier's mind was a whirlwind. The tension inside him was building to a breaking point. He had to make a decision. Could he blend the legacy of the Musk family with the life of purpose that Pope Francis had shown him? Or would he have to choose one path over the other? The rising conflict within him was undeniable. And Xavier knew that the answers he sought wouldn't come easily. Xavier spent the next few weeks in a haze, caught between the two worlds that were pulling him in opposite directions. On one side, there was the undeniable force of his father's empire. Elon Musk's empire, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, was a juggernaut of innovation and success, and Xavier had been groomed to be a part of it. But now, the more he reflected on his time with Pope Francis, the more the weight of his own existence, his own search for purpose, pressed down on him. The world of technology, progress, and wealth felt increasingly hollow, a relentless cycle of achievement with no end in sight. He had experienced the highs of groundbreaking innovation, the excitement of new projects, and the promise of making a difference. But each success came with a price, a cost that seemed to eat away at his soul. The more his father demanded, the more he found himself lost in the noise. Then there was the other path, the one he had discovered through the Pope's teachings, one of kindness, humility, and living with purpose beyond material wealth. It wasn't an easy choice to make, but it was a path that seemed to resonate with something deep within him, a quiet voice that had been silenced by years of pursuing his father's ambitions. One night, after a particularly exhausting meeting at Tesla, Xavier found himself at a crossroads. He was sitting alone in his apartment, staring out at the city of Los Angeles, the lights below twinkling like stars. He was exhausted, physically and mentally. The endless demands from his father, the pressure to live up to the Musk name, and the growing feeling of emptiness gnawing at him had taken its toll. His phone buzzed, and for a moment, Xavier didn't want to answer. But then he saw the caller ID. It was from Pope Francis's office. The Pope's secretary had called several times in the past, but this time, the tone of the message was different. Xavier's heart skipped a beat. "Mr. Musk, the Holy Father would like to speak with you," the voice on the other end of the line said, her tone respectful but urgent. "If you're available, he would be happy to meet with you again." Xavier didn't hesitate. The invitation was both a surprise and a welcome relief. Maybe this was the conversation he had been waiting for, the one that could finally provide clarity. Without another thought, he agreed to the meeting. His thoughts, previously clouded with doubt, began to clear with the prospect of seeking guidance from someone who had led a life so vastly different from his own. The next day, Xavier found himself sitting in a small, quiet room within the Vatican, the same room where he had first met Pope Francis months ago. The Pope greeted him with his usual warmth, his eyes filled with an understanding that Xavier couldn't quite explain. It was as though the Pope could see into his very soul, could sense the turmoil that had been building inside him. "Xavier, my son," the Pope began, his voice soft yet firm. "You've been struggling, haven't you?" Xavier nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He had spent so much time trying to make sense of his life, trying to figure out which path to take, but now, in the presence of Pope Francis, the words he had been holding back seemed to spill out all at once. "I don't know what to do," Xavier admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions. My father wants me to follow in his footsteps, to be part of something big, to change the world with technology. But there's a part of me that feels like I'm losing myself in it. I don't know if I can keep doing this. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to walk away." The Pope listened intently, nodding along as Xavier spoke. There was no judgment in his eyes, only compassion. "You're not alone in feeling torn," Pope Francis said, his voice gentle but firm. "The world will always pull us in different directions, especially when we are young and full of dreams. But you must remember, true fulfillment does not come from the external measures of success. It comes from within, from the peace and purpose you find when you live in alignment with your values." Xavier felt a flicker of hope stir inside him. "I've been so focused on what the world expects of me," Xavier continued, "on what I think my father wants me to do. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to this image of success, of achievement. But now I'm wondering if that's all there is. Is it enough?" Pope Francis smiled kindly, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. "You see, my son, the world will always ask you to be more successful, more influential, more powerful. But that is not where your true strength lies. Your strength comes from your ability to serve, to love, and to find meaning in the relationships you build, not the achievements you amass. You must decide what legacy you want to leave behind. Will it be one of power, wealth, and prestige, or one of compassion, humility, and service?" Xavier's heart raced as the Pope's words sank in. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had been running from one goal to the next, chasing an ideal that he had never fully understood. And now, in the presence of the Pope, he realized that the race wasn't his to run. "I've been so afraid of letting go of what I know, of what I've been taught to pursue," Xavier said quietly. "But maybe it's time to let go of the fear. Maybe it's time to ask myself what I truly want out of life." Pope Francis placed a hand on his shoulder, the warmth of his touch grounding Xavier in the moment. "My son, fear is a powerful force, but it is also the greatest illusion. When you step away from fear, when you embrace love and service, you will find that the path becomes clearer. The journey you are on is not about avoiding pain or hardship, it is about learning to live with purpose, with meaning, and with an open heart." Xavier sat back, allowing the words to sink deep into his soul. For the first time in a long time, he felt as though he was on the cusp of a new beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, and he knew there would be moments of doubt, of second-guessing. But for the first time, he felt ready to walk it, not with the weight of his family's expectations on his shoulders, but with the clarity of his own heart. "I think I understand now," Xavier said softly. "I've been looking for purpose in all the wrong places. Maybe it's time to find it in something more meaningful." The Pope smiled, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. "Remember, Xavier, the world needs both innovation and love. But it is love that will guide you to your true purpose." As Xavier left the Vatican that day, he knew that his journey had only just begun. The road would be challenging, filled with moments of uncertainty and conflict. But he no longer felt afraid. He had found the courage to pursue something deeper, something that would change his life, and perhaps even the world, in ways he never imagined. And as he stepped out into the light of the Roman afternoon, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. The weeks that followed Xavier's conversation with Pope Francis were marked by a deep and unexpected shift in his mindset. As he reflected on the Pope's words, a part of him began to let go of the weight of his father's expectations, though the process was far from easy. Every step forward felt like a battle against his own inner conflict. There were moments when the pull of his family's legacy seemed stronger than ever, and others when the allure of a life devoted to kindness and service felt too distant, almost unattainable. But Xavier was determined to carve out his own path. The more he explored this new world of purpose, of serving others and finding fulfillment outside of the relentless pursuit of success, the more he discovered a deep well of emotion he had never fully allowed himself to tap into. It was as if, for the first time in his life, he was seeing the world through a different lens, one where the values of love, compassion, and humility weren't just abstract ideals but the foundation for everything he wanted to achieve. It was in this emotional turbulence that Xavier received a call that would forever change his life. It was from his mother, Justine Musk, the woman who had always been a stabilizing force in his life. Her voice on the phone was soft, but there was a detectable unease in her tone. "Xavier, I need to talk to you." "It's about your father," she said, her words heavy with concern. "Something has happened, and I'm afraid it's more serious than we thought." Xavier's heart immediately dropped. His father was the embodiment of strength and invincibility in his eyes, an unshakable force who always seemed to have everything under control. The thought of something being wrong with him was incomprehensible. Elon Musk, the man who had turned the world upside down with his groundbreaking companies, was now facing something beyond his control. Xavier's mind raced with questions, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Mom, what's going on?" Xavier asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "There's been a major setback with one of his ventures. The situation with SpaceX has escalated. There's a critical launch coming up, and he's under a lot of pressure." "I've never seen him like this before," she explained. "I think it's affecting him more than he's letting on." Xavier could hear the worry in his mother's voice, and it hit him like a ton of bricks. The thought of his father, his powerful, larger-than-life father, struggling was almost impossible to comprehend. Xavier had always been there to support Elon in the background, but now he felt a deep, overwhelming desire to step in and help in whatever way he could. This wasn't just a business problem, it was a personal one. Elon was facing the kind of pressure that could break even the strongest people, and Xavier knew that this might be the moment where he had to choose. Would he follow his father's path and dive headfirst into the world of technology, or would he continue down the path of service, with love and compassion at the forefront? Xavier arrived at the SpaceX headquarters later that day, his mind racing. As he walked through the hallways of the company's sprawling campus, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would finally bring clarity to the conflict that had been gnawing at him for weeks. Elon was in a conference room, surrounded by engineers and project managers, his face tense with exhaustion. The usual fire in his eyes seemed dimmed, replaced by an air of uncertainty. For the first time in his life, Xavier saw his father as vulnerable, unsure of the future, as though the immense weight of his empire was too much to bear. As Xavier stepped into the room, all eyes turned toward him. Elon's gaze softened when he saw his son, though the stress in his eyes remained. "Xavier," Elon said, his voice strained but sincere. "I didn't expect you to come here today. But I'm glad you did. I need your help." Xavier felt a lump form in his throat. This wasn't the father he knew. This wasn't the man who had always seemed in control, unflappable. This was a man at the edge of his endurance, looking to his son for support. "I'm here, Dad," Xavier said, his voice firm, though his heart was heavy with emotion. "What's going on? How can I help?" Elon took a deep breath and turned to the team around him. "We're facing a problem with the Mars mission. The launch is scheduled in less than a month, and there's a technical issue that could delay everything. If we don't solve this, we could lose the whole project, and the consequences could be disastrous. The room fell into tense silence as Elon explained the magnitude of the problem. Every team member in the room seemed equally on edge, knowing the stakes were higher than they had ever been. But Xavier wasn't focused on the technical details. His gaze was fixed on his father, who was clearly struggling to hold it together. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment where the world of progress, technology, and ambition collided with the deeper question of what truly mattered. "Dad," Xavier began, his voice cutting through the tension, "I've been thinking a lot lately. About what I really want in life. About what's truly important." Elon looked at him, his face creased with exhaustion. "This isn't the time for that, Xavier. We have a crisis on our hands, and I need you to help me fix this. This mission is everything. It's not just about SpaceX, it's about the future of humanity." Xavier stood there for a moment, torn between the pull of his father's mission and the pull of the values he had recently embraced. He looked at Elon, his father, the visionary, and realized that no matter how much he admired him, he couldn't allow himself to be consumed by the same unrelenting drive that had defined his father's life. The moment felt like an emotional breaking point, one that would change everything. "Dad," Xavier said, his voice shaking with emotion, "I know how important this is to you. But I can't ignore what I've learned. I've realized that true fulfillment comes from living with purpose and love, not just achievement. I don't want to be a part of something that just keeps pushing forward without thinking about the people who matter along the way." For the first time in years, Xavier felt a wave of clarity wash over him. He knew that he was making a difficult decision, one that would change the course of his life. It was a decision that came with heartache, with the understanding that he might never fully live up to his father's legacy. But in that moment, Xavier realized that he could no longer stay in a world that didn't align with his soul's true purpose. Elon looked at him, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Then, slowly, he spoke. "You don't have to follow in my footsteps, Xavier," Elon said quietly. "But I hope you'll understand that what we do here, it's more than just business. It's about changing the world. It's about making a difference." Xavier nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I know, Dad. I understand. But I have to follow my own path. And right now, that path leads me somewhere else." The emotional weight of the moment was overwhelming, but Xavier felt a sense of relief. He wasn't abandoning his father. He wasn't turning his back on the things that had defined him. He was simply choosing to embrace a new way of living, one that honored the values of love, service, and humility that he had learned from Pope Francis. As he turned to leave the room, Xavier knew that his journey had just begun. And while it would be filled with difficult choices and painful moments, he felt ready to walk it with an open heart. Xavier walked out of the SpaceX headquarters with a heavy heart, but strangely, he felt a sense of liberation. The world he had once felt compelled to conquer was now behind him. There was no more pressure to prove himself in the high-stakes arena of his father's empire. No more constant race to outdo the last success or accumulate more wealth, recognition, and power. The weight of those expectations had been slowly lifted, and in its place was something new, something raw, vulnerable, and, for the first time in a long time, genuine. The decision to walk away from his father's legacy wasn't easy. It came with pain, fear, and uncertainty. He had grown up in a world that idolized success and achievement above all else. Every interaction, every expectation, had been centered around reaching new heights, solving bigger problems, and changing the world through technology. It was a world that valued power, intellect, and the relentless pursuit of progress. But in his heart, Xavier knew that the path he was about to take, the one that would lead him away from the technology that had defined his life, was the only one that felt true. He had discovered something profound during his time with Pope Francis. Something that resonated with him in a way no rocket launch or groundbreaking invention ever could. It wasn't about being first, or the richest, or the most influential, it was about finding meaning in the simple acts of love, kindness, and service. It was about the impact you had on the people around you, and the legacy you left behind, not in your achievements, but in the way you treated others and the love you shared. As he sat alone in his apartment later that evening, Xavier reflected on everything that had led him to this point. The road had been long, and the journey had been filled with moments of doubt and confusion. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt as though he could breathe. He opened his phone and scrolled through the messages and emails that had accumulated over the past few days. There were texts from his father, from his friends, and from his business associates. Each one asking him where he had been, why he hadn't been more involved in the latest developments. Xavier paused over his father's message. It was a simple one, but the words felt heavy. "I understand, Xavier. I'll always be proud of you, no matter what path you choose." Those words stung, but not in the way he expected. There was no anger, no resentment. Just an overwhelming sense of love, mixed with the unmistakable weight of years of unspoken expectations. Xavier couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake. Had he walked away from something that could have changed the world? Had he failed to live up to his potential? The questions lingered in the back of his mind, but each time he thought about them, he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned. In the silence of his apartment, he thought back to his conversation with Pope Francis. The Pope had spoken of love, of service, and of living with purpose. And now, Xavier realized that the world didn't need another billionaire chasing innovation for innovation's sake. What the world needed, what he needed, was to focus on the heart of the matter. What kind of legacy did he want to leave behind? A legacy of tech dominance, or one of compassion and service? He reached for his phone again, this time dialing a number he had hesitated to call for weeks, Pope Francis. After a few rings, the familiar voice answered. "Xavier, my son, it is good to hear from you," the Pope said warmly. "Pope Francis, I wanted to thank you," Xavier began, his voice steady. "Thank you for helping me find my way. I've made a decision. I'm leaving everything behind, the business, the projects. I need to live a life of purpose, not just success. I want to help people, to make a difference, but in a way that's true to my heart." The Pope's voice was filled with pride and understanding. "I am glad to hear that, Xavier. The path you have chosen is not easy. There will be challenges, moments when doubt will creep in. But remember, the greatest journey you will take is the one within. It is the journey to find your true self, to walk with love in your heart, and to serve those around you with humility and compassion." Xavier nodded, the words sinking deep into his soul. "I understand. It's not going to be easy, but it's the right choice. Remember, my son," Pope Francis continued, "it is not the grand gestures that matter most. It is the small, quiet acts of love that can change the world. Serve those who are in need, and in that service, you will find your true purpose." Xavier sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of the Pope's words. The emotional journey he had been on wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt at peace with where it was taking him. His life would no longer be about chasing after the next big thing, but about focusing on the people around him and the impact he could have on their lives. "I will, Pope Francis," Xavier said quietly. "Thank you. Thank you for everything." As he ended the call, Xavier looked out the window at the city below. It was a world that had once seemed overwhelming and cold, but now, he saw it with new eyes. He wasn't part of the race for power and influence anymore. He had stepped off the treadmill, and he was ready to begin something new, something that would change him, and the world, in ways he couldn't yet fully understand. It was time for Xavier Musk to start living for more than just himself. It was time for him to follow his heart. Xavier spent the next few weeks in a state of quiet reflection, attempting to realign his life with the new purpose he had discovered. The decision to walk away from everything he had known, the empire built by his father, the pressure to follow in his footsteps, the world of innovation and technology, was monumental. And yet, with every passing day, it felt more and more like the right choice. He had taken a step into the unknown, and while fear still lingered in the corners of his mind, there was a sense of peace that came with surrendering to the uncertainty of the future. It was liberating, almost as though he had shed a skin that had long outgrown him. But now, Xavier wasn't concerned with how the world saw him or what legacy he would leave in the business world. He was focused on something simpler and more profound, the people around him. The first step in his new life began with an idea. Xavier had spent his entire life surrounded by the world's best engineers, scientists, and thinkers, but he realized that the true answers to the world's most pressing problems didn't lie in technology alone. What the world needed were people who were willing to help, to listen, and to serve. Not just fix things, but to heal. He decided to launch a foundation. Something that would be dedicated to providing mental health support, community outreach, and educational programs for underprivileged children. It wasn't about making billions of dollars. It was about making a difference in the lives of people who had been overlooked or forgotten by society. At first, the idea seemed overwhelming. How could he, a man born into such privilege, truly understand the needs of those who were suffering in ways he had never experienced? He had always been part of the elite, the ones with the resources, the ones with the power. But the more he reflected on his journey, the more he realized that it was precisely because of his background that he had the ability to create change. He had the resources, yes, but he also had the experience of knowing what it felt like to be caught between two worlds, the one of incredible wealth and success, and the other of deep, personal confusion and struggle. He began reaching out to people who had been doing this work for years, nonprofits, mental health experts, and community leaders who understood the real challenges people faced. Xavier learned that making real change wasn't about quick fixes or grand gestures. It was about building long-term relationships, listening to the stories of those in need, and empowering them to overcome the obstacles they faced. As he threw himself into the work, Xavier found a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. There were no deadlines, no board meetings, no expectations to meet. There was only the work itself, and the knowledge that each small step forward made a tangible difference in someone's life. One morning, Xavier received an unexpected phone call. It was from his father, Elon. The call had been months in the making, as Elon had been strangely quiet ever since their last conversation. For a moment, Xavier hesitated, unsure of what his father's message would be. But he had to answer. "Xavier," Elon's voice crackled through the line, still as sharp and precise as ever. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. And I've come to understand something. Maybe I've been so focused on the future of technology that I lost sight of the things that truly matter." Xavier took a deep breath, unsure of how to respond. "Dad, I didn't want to make you feel like you were doing something wrong. I just realized that for me, the future wasn't about building more things. It was about helping people." "I know," Elon replied quietly. "I'm proud of you, Xavier. I may not have fully understood it at the time, but now, I see what you're doing. You're making a difference, and that's something I respect." Xavier felt a wave of relief wash over him. For so long, he had feared that his decision to leave behind his father's world would lead to a permanent rift. But this conversation, this small but meaningful moment, felt like a bridge being built between them. It wasn't about changing the past or trying to live up to each other's expectations. It was about understanding that their lives, though different, had value in their own right. "I'm glad you understand," Xavier said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't expect you to, but it means a lot to me that you do." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Elon spoke again. "I think, maybe I need to look at things differently, too. I've been so focused on the big picture, on sending people to Mars, on changing the world with technology. But maybe, just maybe, the real change begins here on Earth. In the lives of the people we can touch today." Xavier smiled. His father, the man who had always seemed invincible, was now reflecting on his own journey. For the first time in his life, Xavier didn't feel like he was the one who needed to change. He wasn't trying to fix his father. But just as he had learned that he could change the course of his life, Elon too was starting to see the bigger picture. "I think that's a step in the right direction, Dad," Xavier said. "And I'll be here, if you ever need help figuring out the next steps. We're in this together, even if our paths are different." The call ended, leaving Xavier with a deep sense of satisfaction. His relationship with his father, once fraught with tension and unspoken expectations, was slowly evolving into something more genuine, more understanding. They might never fully agree on everything, but they were beginning to see each other for who they truly were, not as father and son, not as businessman and heir, but as human beings searching for meaning and connection in a complicated world. And for Xavier, that was enough. He didn't need to have it all figured out. He didn't need to become the next great entrepreneur or tech mogul. He simply needed to be true to himself and find his place in the world. The foundation was taking off, and Xavier was more involved than ever, not just as a figurehead, but as someone who genuinely wanted to make a difference. His focus wasn't on the accolades or recognition, it was on the people whose lives he could change, one act of kindness at a time. He had discovered that the road to true fulfillment was not paved with riches or fame, but with the connections he made along the way, and the love he shared with others. And as he looked toward the future, Xavier Musk finally understood what it meant to live with purpose, and how that purpose could transform not only his own life, but the lives of everyone he encountered. It had been nearly 6 months since Xavier took the first step in his new direction. The foundation had grown significantly, thanks to the support of a small team of passionate individuals who believed in the cause as much as he did. They weren't looking to revolutionize the world with technology, but instead to create real, lasting change in people's lives through mental health support, community engagement, and educational initiatives. The work was fulfilling in ways Xavier couldn't have anticipated. Each day, he was confronted with new stories of resilience, of people who had struggled against incredible odds and emerged stronger. It wasn't easy. The path was still riddled with challenges: fundraising, outreach, gaining the trust of people who had been neglected by the system for so long. But with every small victory, Xavier felt a deep, emotional connection to the work. It was no longer about the next big project or the accolades that came with being the son of Elon Musk. It was about the tangible impact he could have on the lives of people who needed it the most. On a crisp autumn morning, Xavier found himself sitting in a small coffee shop in downtown Los Angeles, meeting with a young woman named Maria. She was in her mid-20s, with dark eyes that reflected a mixture of sadness and strength. Maria was a counselor who worked with at-risk youth in the area, and Xavier had invited her to meet in order to better understand the struggles young people in the community were facing. "I've seen a lot of kids come through our programs," Maria began, taking a sip of her coffee. "A lot of them are dealing with trauma, violence, neglect, poverty. But what strikes me the most is how few of them have someone they can really trust. Someone who's not looking to judge them, or fix them, or see them as a case. They just need someone who can listen. That's the real work." Xavier nodded, absorbing her words. They echoed the conversations he had been having with others in the community, but hearing it from someone who worked so closely with these kids made it feel even more urgent. There was a deep need for connection, for a genuine human presence, something that technology and innovation couldn't replace. No app or invention could provide the kind of emotional support that these young people needed. "I agree," Xavier said quietly. "That's why I started this foundation. But I think we need to take it a step further. It's not enough to just offer resources. We need to create environments where people, especially kids, can feel safe, where they can begin to trust themselves and others again." Maria looked at him with a mix of surprise and admiration. "You've got it, Xavier. That's the key right there. Building trust. And that's where we can make a real difference." The conversation continued, delving deeper into the specific challenges faced by young people today, from anxiety and depression to the pressures of social media and the fear of failure. Xavier was struck by the complexity of the issues but also by the sense of hope that still managed to shine through. Maria spoke about the importance of resilience, how it was not about erasing the pain but learning to cope with it, to use it as a source of strength rather than something that defined you. As their meeting came to a close, Xavier stood up, a renewed sense of determination in his chest. He had always known that helping people was about more than just offering money or resources. It was about understanding the human experience in all its complexity. But now, after hearing Maria's insights, he felt a clearer sense of direction for the next phase of the Foundation's work. It wasn't just about helping people cope with their pain. It was about helping them find strength in their own stories and offering them a safe space to grow. Later that evening, as Xavier sat in his office, his thoughts were racing. He had spent so much of his life chasing after something that never felt quite right, but now, he was beginning to see how all the pieces fit together. His decision to leave the business world hadn't been a failure. It had been the beginning of something far more meaningful. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Rebecca, his right-hand woman at the Foundation, who had been with him since the very start. "Xavier, I think you should see this," she said, handing him a report. "We've got some numbers from the first phase of the community outreach program." Xavier skimmed through the pages, his eyes widening as he saw the results. The program had reached more people than they had anticipated, and the feedback from participants had been overwhelmingly positive. People who had been skeptical at first, those who were hesitant to trust a new initiative, were now actively engaging with the services they offered. It wasn't just that they were receiving help, they were becoming active participants in their own healing, forging connections with others and finding support in their community. "This is incredible," Xavier said, his voice filled with awe. "It's working. It's really working." Rebecca smiled. "You've done more than just create a foundation. You've created a movement, Xavier. People are seeing the impact, and they want to be a part of it." For the first time in his life, Xavier felt that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The work he was doing wasn't about making headlines or being the center of attention. It was about creating a ripple effect of love and care that spread far beyond anything he could have imagined. It wasn't just about building a legacy for himself, it was about helping to build a better world for others. As the days passed, Xavier found himself more deeply immersed in the work. He traveled to different communities, meeting with local leaders and educators, listening to the stories of those who had experienced hardship and struggle. He learned more than he could have ever imagined about the resilience of the human spirit, and he felt humbled by the strength of the people he met. One afternoon, Xavier sat in a small classroom in a neighborhood school, listening to a group of teenagers share their thoughts on the challenges they faced. They spoke candidly about the pressure they felt to succeed, the isolation they experienced in a world dominated by social media, and the deep sense of inadequacy that so many of them carried. As one young girl, Rosa, spoke about her own struggles with depression, Xavier felt a deep pang in his chest. But as she finished, she looked up at him with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I don't know if things will ever be perfect," Rosa said, "but I do know this. I'm not alone anymore. I know there are people who care." Xavier smiled, his heart full. This was what it was all about. This was the real change, the human connection that brought people back from the brink of despair, that made them feel seen, heard, and valued. As he left the school that day, Xavier realized that the journey he had started was just beginning. The road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready to walk it. With each step forward, he was no longer just Xavier Musk, the son of a billionaire. He was Xavier Musk, a man with a purpose, driven by love, compassion, and a desire to make the world a better place, one small act at a time. Xavier's heart swelled with purpose as he continued his journey, immersing himself fully in the work of his foundation. But there was something deeper at play now. His understanding of the world had shifted, and it wasn't just about changing the lives of others. It was also about the growth he was experiencing, the connections he was forming, and the new way he saw himself and his role in the world. For years, Xavier had been confined by the expectations that came with his last name, a pressure that weighed heavily on his shoulders. But with each new conversation, each life he touched, he realized how much more fulfilling it was to be recognized for who he truly was, someone who cared, someone who listened, and someone who was willing to help. The fear of judgment, the concern over legacy, began to fade as his new life unfolded before him, one conversation at a time. The next breakthrough came unexpectedly. Xavier had been invited to speak at a mental health conference in New York City. It wasn't a grand event, just a modest gathering of activists, psychologists, and social workers. But to Xavier, it felt like a turning point. This was his moment to speak about the vision that had been growing within him and to connect with like-minded individuals who were doing the same kind of work. Standing backstage, he could hear the buzz of the crowd, the low murmur of people catching up and discussing their work. For a moment, he felt an old pang of uncertainty. The nerves, the stage fright, he was no stranger to these feelings. But this time, it was different. The fear wasn't tied to his reputation or performance, it was about making sure his message landed the way he intended. He didn't want to speak from a place of privilege. He didn't want to sound like he was giving a lecture from on high. He wanted to share his truth, to let others know that even someone like him, someone with all the advantages in the world, had to learn the hard way how much humanity mattered. When his name was called, Xavier stepped up to the podium, and for a brief moment, his eyes scanned the room. The audience was diverse, a mix of people who had dedicated their lives to mental health advocacy, parents who had lost children to suicide, young adults struggling with their own mental health battles, and activists determined to bring change to the system. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was on the outside looking in. He felt like he belonged here. "Good morning, everyone," Xavier began, his voice slightly shaky at first. "I've been invited here to talk about mental health, to share my journey, and to offer some insight into how we can all do better. But I want to start by telling you this, I'm still figuring it out. I don't have all the answers. I don't have a magic formula. But I can tell you this, what I've learned so far is that we have to start with one thing, connection." He paused, letting the words sink in. There were nods of agreement from the audience, and it gave him the confidence to continue. "You see, for so much of my life, I was trying to solve problems in a way that felt logical. Build something, create something, innovate something. And I thought that was the answer to everything. If you could just make the right invention or develop the perfect idea, you could change the world. But I've come to realize that the real solution isn't in technology or breakthroughs. It's in people." Xavier took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling on his chest. He continued, "Mental health, like anything in life, isn't just about fixing problems. It's about connecting with others, understanding their pain, and being there with them in the mess of it all. It's about making sure no one has to go through their struggles alone. Because sometimes, the hardest thing in the world is just to feel like someone sees you, someone understands you." A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd, and Xavier felt the energy in the room shift. This was no longer just a speech. It was a conversation, an exchange of shared understanding. People were listening, and they were ready to engage. "I've spent the past few months working on something I believe can make a difference," he continued. "It's not just about providing resources or financial aid. It's about creating safe spaces where people can come together, where they can be heard, and where they can find strength in each other. And through these spaces, we can build a sense of community, of belonging, things that so many of us are missing, especially when it comes to mental health." The room was silent now, everyone hanging on his words. Xavier could feel the weight of their attention, but it wasn't intimidating. It was inspiring. He was no longer standing in front of them as the son of Elon Musk or as a man with a reputation to uphold. He was simply someone who cared, someone who understood the need for connection. "I'm not here to promise you that things will get better overnight," Xavier concluded. "But I am here to tell you that change is possible, and it starts with us, by seeing each other, by reaching out, and by being present for those who need us. If we can do that, we can make a difference. We can change the narrative around mental health. We can give people the support they deserve." As he finished, there was a moment of stunned silence before the room erupted into applause. Xavier felt a rush of emotion, the kind that came when you spoke from your heart and saw others connect with your words. This wasn't just validation of his work, it was a shared understanding that transcended words. It was connection in its purest form. Backstage, after the speech, several individuals approached him, eager to connect. There were people from all walks of life, therapists, educators, social workers, who had been inspired by what he had said. Each conversation reinforced the message that Xavier was trying to convey: we're all in this together. And through that shared commitment, true progress could be made. In the days that followed, Xavier found himself thinking more and more about what this meant for his foundation. He wasn't just a speaker at conferences now, he was becoming part of a global movement, a collective of people who believed in the power of connection, the importance of empathy, and the value of human interaction. It became clear to Xavier that his next step was not just to build more programs or expand his reach. He needed to build a network, a coalition of people, organizations, and communities that were all committed to the same mission. Only together could they create lasting, meaningful change. And so, with renewed vigor, Xavier set to work on expanding his foundation's reach, not just by offering more services, but by cultivating a true sense of community, one where everyone, no matter their background or struggles, had a place. It was a massive undertaking, but for the first time, Xavier felt like he had a vision that was big enough to encompass the world. As he sat at his desk late one evening, going over plans and goals, Xavier smiled. He knew that the road ahead would be long, but he was no longer afraid. Because in that moment, surrounded by the connections he had built, he felt that everything he had done, everything he was doing, was exactly where he needed to be. The following months were a whirlwind for Xavier. His foundation had gained a surprising amount of momentum after his speech at the mental health conference. He had received countless messages from people who were touched by his words, letters from parents, letters from teachers, and even messages from people who had struggled with mental health issues themselves. They all seemed to echo the same sentiment: Xavier had articulated what they had long felt but couldn't quite express. And for that, they were grateful. As much as Xavier wanted to bask in the success, he knew that there was more work to do. The impact he had seen so far was encouraging, but it was just the beginning. He knew that the real challenge lay in creating systemic change. Changing the narrative around mental health required more than just awareness. It needed action, policy change, and a concerted effort from all corners of society. One morning, as Xavier sat in his office sifting through emails and preparing for a big meeting with a potential donor, his phone rang. It was his sister, Alyssa. "Xavier," she said, her voice sounding more serious than usual. "We need to talk. It's about Mom." Xavier's heart skipped a beat. He and Alyssa had been close growing up, but their relationship with their mother had always been complicated. Their mother, Justine Musk, was a successful businesswoman in her own right, but her relationship with her children had always been somewhat distant. She had been a figure of authority in their lives, but not one who had always been emotionally available. "What's going on?" Xavier asked, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. "She's been going through something. I think she's been struggling with her own mental health for a while now, and she hasn't really said anything to anyone. But it's getting worse. She's not herself, Xavier," Alyssa explained, her voice cracking. "I think she needs help. We need to do something." Xavier sat back in his chair, the weight of his sister's words settling over him. He had known that their mother had always been tough, always had high expectations, but he had never considered that she might be struggling with her own mental health issues. The realization hit him harder than he expected. The person who had always seemed like the strongest figure in his life was now, in some ways, just as vulnerable as anyone else. "I don't know what to do," Alyssa continued, her voice tinged with concern. "We're all busy, and she's not exactly the type of person who would just open up about this. I think she feels like admitting it would be a weakness." Xavier felt a pang of guilt. He knew his mother's pride well. She had always prided herself on her independence and strength. Admitting weakness, especially in front of her children, was something she had never allowed herself to do. But now, in the face of her own struggles, Xavier realized that this very pride might be keeping her from getting the help she needed. "I'll come by today," Xavier said, his voice firm with determination. "We'll talk to her. She doesn't have to go through this alone." It wasn't until later that afternoon, as Xavier arrived at their mother's house, that the weight of the situation truly hit him. Walking into the familiar home, he was reminded of how little he had seen his mother in recent years. Their paths had diverged as they grew older. Xavier had become consumed with his own career, his own journey, and his own struggles. And while they had kept in touch, there had been a distance, an unspoken barrier between them that neither had ever really addressed. When Justine opened the door, Xavier was taken aback by how much she had changed. She was no longer the imposing figure he remembered from his childhood. She looked tired, drawn. There were deep lines etched around her eyes, lines that spoke of sleepless nights and quiet suffering. "Xavier," she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. "You didn't have to come." "I'm fine." Xavier's heart ached at the words. She wasn't fine. He could see it in the way she held herself, in the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice gentle but insistent. "Alyssa told me what's been going on, and I'm here for you. You don't have to do this alone." Justine paused, her eyes flickering with something like hesitation. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, with a deep sigh, she finally let her guard down, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to be vulnerable in front of her son. "I've been struggling, Xavier," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to explain it. I've been overwhelmed. I feel like I'm losing control. Everything feels like it's slipping away, and I don't know what to do." Xavier sat down beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. For a brief moment, the world outside seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, mother and son, grappling with the rawness of their emotions. "You don't have to fix it all at once, Mom," Xavier said softly. "But you don't have to carry it alone. We can help you get the support you need. It's okay to ask for help." Justine's eyes welled up with tears, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. They sat in silence, just letting the weight of the moment settle. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For Justine, for Xavier, and for their family as a whole. In the days that followed, Justine began the difficult process of seeking therapy, something she had always viewed as unnecessary for herself. But now, with Xavier's support, she was willing to take the first step toward healing. Xavier knew that this was only the beginning of a long journey, not just for his mother, but for him as well. It was a reminder that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a strength. It was through allowing ourselves to be vulnerable that we could truly connect with others and begin the healing process. It was something he had preached to others, but now, for the first time, he was seeing it firsthand in his own life. As Xavier left his mother's house that evening, he reflected on everything he had learned. He had spent so much of his life focused on doing and achieving, but now he understood that true strength wasn't just in accomplishing things, it was in allowing yourself to be seen, to be supported, and to support others in return. It was in the moments of vulnerability that we truly grew, not just as individuals, but as a society. And as he drove home that night, Xavier made a silent promise to himself. He would continue his work, but now, with a new understanding of what it truly meant to heal, to help, and to be there for others. He would continue to fight for connection, because he knew, more than ever, that it was the key to changing lives. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Xavier's commitment to the mental health cause was stronger than ever. The success of his foundation had ignited a fire in him to do more, to dig deeper, and to fight harder for those who were suffering in silence. However, the events of the past few months had also taught him an invaluable lesson: change didn't happen in grand gestures or big moments. It happened in the small, quiet conversations that people had with each other, the real, personal exchanges that changed lives in ways no speech or policy could. But as Xavier was learning, the journey toward change wasn't without its moments of doubt. There were days when he felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the task at hand. There were times when the weight of other people's pain and the constant demand for action seemed too much to bear. He had learned to give of himself freely, to pour into others and their needs, but somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten to check in with himself. It was a quiet morning in late spring when Xavier received a phone call that would set his path in a new direction. He had just finished a meeting with his foundation's team, discussing ways to expand their reach, when his phone rang. The caller ID displayed an unexpected name, someone from the Vatican. Curious, he answered. "Hello, Xavier. My name is Father Antonio," the voice on the other end said warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting your day." "No, not at all," Xavier responded, intrigued. "How can I help you?" "I'm calling on behalf of His Holiness, Pope Francis," Father Antonio continued. "We've been following the work your foundation is doing, and we'd like to extend an invitation for you to meet with the Pope. We believe your mission aligns closely with some of the values His Holiness champions, and he would like to hear more about your work." Xavier sat back, stunned. An invitation from the Pope. It was a moment he had never anticipated, but one that felt like a sign. A validation of everything he had been working toward. "I'd be honored," Xavier said, his voice filled with both excitement and reverence. "When is the meeting?" Father Antonio provided the details for the meeting, and within a week, Xavier found himself boarding a flight to Rome. As he sat in the airport lounge, Xavier couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. Just a few years ago, he had been a young man unsure of his place in the world, burdened by the weight of his family's legacy. Now, here he was, preparing to meet the leader of the Catholic Church, someone whose influence and words had shaped the lives of millions. It felt surreal, almost impossible, but the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like the right next step in his journey. When he arrived at the Vatican, Xavier was struck by the beauty of the place. The towering architecture, the serenity of the surroundings, it was like stepping into a different world. But more than the grandeur, Xavier felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling that he couldn't quite explain. It was as though the very air around him carried a deep sense of purpose and history. Father Antonio greeted him at the door and led him through the halls of the Vatican, each step reverberating with the echoes of centuries of faith. Xavier couldn't help but feel small in such a place, but he was determined to stay grounded. This was not a meeting with a figurehead. This was a conversation with someone who, like him, was passionate about making a difference in the world. As they entered a small, quiet room, there was Pope Francis, seated at a table, his kind eyes focused on a stack of papers in front of him. He looked up and smiled warmly as Xavier entered. "Welcome, Xavier," Pope Francis said, his voice soft yet filled with warmth. "I've heard so much about the work you are doing. It is truly inspiring." Xavier, still slightly awestruck, shook the Pope's hand. "Thank you, Your Holiness. It's an honor to be here." They sat down, and the conversation began. Xavier spoke passionately about his foundation, about his belief in the power of connection, and about how mental health needed to be at the forefront of social change. He spoke of the challenges he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the incredible impact of the people he had met along the way. Pope Francis listened intently, nodding thoughtfully as Xavier spoke. There was no rush in the conversation, no sense of formality or agenda. It was just two people, sharing their hearts with each other. "I admire your vision, Xavier," Pope Francis said after a pause. "It is clear to me that you are not just trying to change the world. You are trying to heal it, to bring people together in a way that transcends the divisions we see in society." Xavier smiled, grateful for the Pope's words. "I believe that connection is the key to everything. When people are seen, when they feel heard, that's when change can happen." We need to stop treating people's struggles as something to be fixed and start treating them with compassion, with understanding. Pope Francis leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. You are absolutely right. We live in a world where so many are suffering in silence, where mental health is still stigmatized, and where people are afraid to seek help. But I believe that the Church has a role to play in this. The message of Christ is one of compassion, of loving others, of recognizing the humanity in every person. This is not just a spiritual issue, it is a human one. Xavier felt a deep sense of connection to Pope Francis in that moment. He had always admired the Pope's humility and commitment to social justice, but now, sitting in this room, he realized how deeply their visions aligned. There is much work to be done, Pope Francis continued, but I believe that together, we can make a significant difference. The Church can offer support, guidance, and a sense of belonging to those who are struggling, especially when it comes to mental health. Your foundation can help lead the way in making this a global movement. Xavier felt a surge of hope. This wasn't just an endorsement, it was a partnership in a shared mission. The Pope wasn't just giving him the blessing of the Church, he was giving him a powerful ally in the fight for mental health awareness and compassion. As the meeting drew to a close, Pope Francis stood and extended his hand once more. You are doing good work, Xavier. Keep moving forward, and know that you have the support of the Church. Together, we can build a world where no one has to suffer in silence. Xavier felt a wave of gratitude wash over him as he shook the Pope's hand. Thank you, Your Holiness. I won't forget this. Walking out of the Vatican that day, Xavier was filled with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The journey ahead would still be challenging, but now, he had a global ally in Pope Francis. It was a moment of clarity, an affirmation that the work he was doing was not just important, but truly transformative. The weight of the Pope's words echoed in his mind as he boarded the plane back home. He had always known that connection was the key to healing, but now, he realized just how far-reaching that connection could be. With the Pope's blessing, Xavier was more determined than ever to make sure that no one ever had to face their struggles alone. Xavier's return to the United States was met with a renewed sense of purpose. The meeting with Pope Francis had ignited something inside of him, a deeper conviction about the work he was doing and a realization that he was part of something much bigger than himself. It was no longer just about his foundation or the people he had met along the way, it was about a global movement that needed to address the deep-rooted issues surrounding mental health. As Xavier settled back into his daily routine, he began planning the next phase of his foundation's growth. The support of the Vatican was a monumental milestone, but he understood that true change required more than just backing from influential figures. It required systemic transformation, reaching into schools, workplaces, and communities, breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health and offering resources to those in need. One afternoon, just a few weeks after his return, Xavier received a call from an unexpected source, Dr. Linda Hayes, a well-known psychologist and advocate for mental health reform. Dr. Hayes had been following Xavier's work for years and had recently become aware of his meeting with Pope Francis. Xavier, I've been meaning to reach out to you, Dr. Hayes said, her voice as enthusiastic as ever. The Pope's endorsement is a game-changer. I truly believe we can do something incredible together. Xavier was taken aback. Dr. Hayes was a pioneer in the field of psychology, someone whose work had shaped national policies on mental health. For her to take such an interest in his work felt surreal. I'm glad you called, Xavier replied. I've been thinking a lot about how to expand our efforts, and the Pope's support has given me a new sense of direction. I think we're on the brink of something big, but I can't do it alone. That's exactly why I'm calling, Dr. Hayes said. I want to help. I've been working on a comprehensive mental health initiative for years, and I think our organizations could partner to bring it to life. Imagine bringing together your foundation's grassroots work with the research and policy influence we've cultivated in the mental health community. We could make a real impact on a national scale. Xavier's mind raced with the possibilities. Dr. Hayes wasn't just a respected figure in the field, she was a leader in policy reform, with decades of experience influencing government action. This was exactly the kind of partnership that could take his work to new heights. "I love the idea," Xavier said. "But I'm curious, how do you envision us working together?" Dr. Hayes explained her vision, a multifaceted approach to mental health that combined education, advocacy, and research. She proposed a national awareness campaign, backed by a comprehensive study on the state of mental health in the U.S. This data would inform the creation of new policies at the local, state, and federal levels, aimed at improving access to care and reducing stigma. The campaign would also focus on training mental health professionals to better serve diverse populations, ensuring that marginalized communities received the support they desperately needed. Xavier was immediately captivated by the idea. It was bold, ambitious, and, most importantly, aligned perfectly with his mission to create lasting change. "This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for," Xavier said. "But we'll need more than just research and policy. We'll need to engage communities, families, schools, and workplaces. Everyone needs to be involved if we're going to tackle this issue." "I agree," Dr. Hayes replied. "That's why we're going to focus on not just the top-down approach, but a bottom-up strategy as well. We need to empower individuals and communities to take ownership of their mental health. If people believe in the value of mental well-being and understand how to care for themselves and each other, we can break down the walls of stigma." Over the next few weeks, Xavier and Dr. Hayes worked tirelessly to draft a proposal for the national initiative. Their vision was clear: they would create a comprehensive, multi-year campaign that would raise awareness, drive policy change, and, most importantly, provide people with the tools they needed to prioritize their mental health. Xavier's role would be crucial in bringing the public's attention to the cause. His foundation's platform, coupled with his growing visibility, would give the initiative the momentum it needed to reach a broad audience. Dr. Hayes, with her deep knowledge of policy and her extensive network within the mental health community, would handle the research and advocacy components. By the end of the month, they were ready to present their proposal to a group of key stakeholders, policymakers, mental health professionals, and potential donors. The day of the presentation arrived, and Xavier found himself standing in front of a room full of influential figures, people whose decisions could shape the future of mental health in the United States. As he looked around the room, Xavier felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was the culmination of everything he had worked for, everything he had fought for. The opportunity to make a real impact was within his grasp. Dr. Hayes began the presentation, outlining the need for systemic change and presenting the research that had informed their initiative. She spoke passionately about the mental health crisis facing the nation, highlighting the alarming statistics about the rise in depression, anxiety, and suicide rates. She made a compelling case for the need to shift the way society viewed mental health, from a personal flaw to a public health priority. Then, it was Xavier's turn. He stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. As he spoke, he reflected on his own journey, on the struggles he had faced, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke about the importance of connection, of community, and of understanding. He shared stories of people who had reached out to him, telling him how his work had impacted their lives. He emphasized that mental health wasn't just an individual issue, it was a societal one. "We need to create a world where no one has to suffer alone," Xavier said, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "This initiative isn't just about policies or statistics. It's about real people, real lives, and the connections we can create to help them heal." The room was silent for a moment, as if everyone was absorbing the gravity of his words. Then, one by one, the stakeholders began to nod, some even standing to applaud. It was a moment of validation that Xavier had long hoped for, but it felt different this time. This wasn't just recognition for his work, it was an invitation to be part of something much larger, something that could change the course of mental health care in the United States. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Hayes turned to Xavier with a smile. "We've got their support. This is just the beginning." Xavier felt a surge of hope. The road ahead would still be challenging, but with the backing of Dr. Hayes, the Pope, and now this coalition of advocates and policymakers, he knew that change was within reach. The days following the successful presentation were a whirlwind. Xavier felt as though he had stepped into a new chapter of his life, one that promised both challenges and victories in equal measure. His foundation was gaining traction, thanks to the backing of Dr. Hayes and the influential figures they had met with. The National Mental Health Initiative was officially underway, and Xavier was at the center of it all. But with success came the weight of responsibility. The initiative's first major step was to launch an awareness campaign across multiple platforms, social media, television, and public events. Xavier worked closely with Dr. Hayes to create content that would not only inform people about mental health but also encourage open conversations. The aim was to normalize mental health discussions, remove the stigma, and provide resources for those struggling. But despite the momentum they were gaining, there was one significant obstacle: corporate involvement. In order to fund their ambitious project, they needed financial support from large corporations. Xavier had always been cautious about corporate sponsorship, wary of the potential for commercial interests to overshadow the initiative's mission. He wasn't willing to sacrifice the integrity of the cause, but without funding, the vision couldn't come to life. One afternoon, Xavier sat with Dr. Hayes in her office, poring over a list of potential sponsors. They had already approached several large companies, but the response had been lukewarm. Many were interested, but reluctant to commit without assurances that the campaign would align with their brand image. It was frustrating, to say the least. "Xavier, I think we might be missing something," Dr. Hayes said, her eyes scanning the list of companies. "What we need is a partner who understands what we're trying to do, not just someone looking to slap their logo on a campaign." Xavier leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He knew Dr. Hayes was right. The initiative needed a partner who believed in the cause, not just in the marketing potential of it. But where could they find such a company? He had spent months trying to align their values with potential sponsors, but nothing had clicked. Just then, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "A new opportunity." Curious, Xavier opened it. The email was from none other than Elon Musk. "Dear Xavier, I've been following your work with the Mental Health Initiative, and I believe in what you're trying to accomplish. I've been thinking a lot about how I can contribute to social change, and mental health is an issue close to my heart. I'd love to discuss how we can partner to create something that truly makes a difference. Let's talk soon. Best, Elon Musk." Xavier stared at the email for several moments, his mind racing. Elon Musk? The billionaire entrepreneur known for his work with Tesla, SpaceX, and other groundbreaking ventures. This was a man whose influence spanned industries and continents. What could he possibly want with a mental health initiative? "Dr. Hayes, you're not going to believe this," Xavier said, his voice barely above a whisper as he read the email aloud. Dr. Hayes blinked in surprise. "Elon Musk? Are you sure it's him?" "I can't imagine it's a fake," Xavier said, his pulse quickening. "This is the real deal." After a few moments of stunned silence, Dr. Hayes spoke up. "Well, I think we might have just found the partner we've been looking for." Xavier agreed. Musk's involvement could bring unprecedented attention to the initiative, as well as the financial resources needed to make it sustainable. But it also posed a unique challenge. Musk was known for his unorthodox approach to business, often willing to take risks that others wouldn't. Would he respect the vision of the initiative, or would he try to take it in a direction that didn't align with Xavier's values? "There's only one way to find out," Xavier said, already drafting a response. The following week, Xavier and Dr. Hayes flew to California to meet Musk in person. The meeting was set to take place at one of his company's headquarters in Palo Alto. As they arrived at the sleek, modern building, Xavier couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was the heart of innovation, where ideas turned into reality at an astonishing pace. But the nerves were real. This was the first time Xavier would be in the same room as someone of Musk's caliber, and the pressure to make a strong impression was intense. When they walked into the conference room, there he was, Elon Musk, dressed casually in a black t-shirt and jeans. He was sitting at the head of the table, his eyes focused on a laptop. Without looking up, he spoke. "Xavier, Dr. Hayes, good to finally meet you both," Musk said, his voice calm and measured. "I've read a lot about your work, and I think we can do something great together." Xavier sat down, still processing the surreal nature of the moment. "Thank you for meeting with us, Mr. Musk. We appreciate your interest in the initiative." Musk finally looked up, and there was an intensity in his eyes that made Xavier pause. "I don't just invest in things for the sake of publicity," Musk said. "I invest in things that I believe have the potential to change the world. And mental health, well, that's something that affects everyone. It's an issue that transcends industries and borders. If we can address it on a global scale, that's a win in my book." Xavier felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was clear that Musk wasn't interested in turning the campaign into a corporate branding exercise. He genuinely believed in the cause. "Here's what I'm thinking," Musk continued. "I can provide the funding and resources to make this a massive global movement. But in exchange, I want to push the boundaries. I want us to look at mental health in new ways, use technology, data, and innovation to create solutions that haven't been imagined yet. I want to bring in experts from fields that don't typically intersect with mental health, like AI, neuroscience, and biotechnology, to truly disrupt the status quo." Xavier listened carefully. It was a bold proposition, one that could lead to groundbreaking advancements in mental health care. But it also came with a risk. Would they be able to maintain the integrity of the initiative while integrating these cutting-edge technologies? After a few moments of consideration, Xavier spoke. "Mr. Musk, I appreciate your vision. And I believe that innovation is essential to solving this crisis. But I want to make sure that everything we do remains focused on the people who need help. This can't be about technology for the sake of technology. It has to be about real, human connection and support." Musk nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "That's exactly what I want too, Xavier. Technology can amplify the human element, not replace it. We're on the same page." With that, the partnership was born. The partnership between Xavier's foundation and Elon Musk's companies took shape faster than Xavier could have ever imagined. Within weeks of their meeting, they began brainstorming ways to integrate cutting-edge technology into the National Mental Health Initiative. Musk's vision was clear: he wanted to revolutionize mental health care by using technology to improve access, personalize treatment, and reduce stigma. The goal was ambitious, but with Musk's financial backing and technological expertise, anything seemed possible. Their first major initiative was to create an app that would serve as a one-stop platform for mental health resources. The app would connect individuals with therapists, provide mental health assessments, offer guided self-help resources, and even connect people to support groups. But Musk didn't just want it to be another wellness app, he wanted it to be a game changer. "Imagine this," Musk said during one of their planning sessions. "What if we could use AI to predict someone's mental health needs before they even recognize them themselves? We could provide personalized recommendations based on behavior patterns and help them before things spiral out of control." Xavier was intrigued but also cautious. AI in mental health had the potential to be revolutionary, but it also carried significant risks. Would people feel comfortable with an algorithm making predictions about their mental health? Could AI truly understand the nuances of human emotion and mental well-being? The idea of using technology in such a personal and intimate field was unsettling, but at the same time, it was impossible to ignore the possibilities. "I see where you're coming from, Elon," Xavier said, trying to balance his excitement with his concerns. "But we have to make sure that the human element doesn't get lost. Technology should be an aid, not a replacement for real human interaction." Dr. Hayes, who had joined their meetings to ensure the initiative remained grounded in mental health best practices, chimed in. We can't forget that mental health care is about more than just providing resources, it's about building trust. People need to feel understood, and an app alone may not be enough to do that. Musk nodded thoughtfully. I get that. So let's make the AI component more like a personal assistant. A tool that helps people manage their mental health, but doesn't replace human connection. The app can recommend resources, provide exercises, track progress, and even set up telehealth appointments with a licensed therapist. But the real breakthrough will be in helping people identify and address issues before they escalate. We can use data and behavioral science to predict problems and give people the tools they need to cope early on. Xavier saw the potential, especially for individuals who may not have access to traditional mental health services. The app could be a bridge, connecting people to help in places where therapists were scarce or where stigma prevented them from seeking support. But it was important to ensure that the app was easy to use and not overwhelming. It had to feel like a supportive friend rather than an intrusive technology. As the team began building the app, Xavier continued his work on the national awareness campaign. He worked tirelessly with Dr. Hayes and their growing team of mental health advocates to spread the word about the initiative. They launched a series of public service announcements that featured real stories of individuals who had overcome mental health challenges. The goal was to show people that they weren't alone, that mental health was just as important as physical health, and that help was available. One of the most touching campaigns featured a video of a woman named Rachel, a mother of two who had struggled with depression for years. In the video, she opened up about her experiences, how she had once felt trapped by the stigma surrounding mental health, how she had felt isolated and hopeless, and how seeking help had changed her life. "This isn't just my story," Rachel said in the video, looking directly into the camera. "It's the story of millions of people out there. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You don't have to go through this alone." The video resonated deeply with viewers, and soon, similar stories were being shared across social media. People began to open up about their own struggles with mental health, using the hashtag #NotAlone to share their experiences. The campaign went viral, reaching millions of people across the globe. Xavier watched as the initiative's reach grew. What had started as a small idea, one that felt like an impossible dream, was now becoming a movement. More and more people were talking about mental health, and they were doing it in a way that was raw and real. They were no longer hiding behind shame or fear, they were stepping into the light and saying, "It's okay to not be okay." But with all the success, Xavier also noticed something troubling. As the campaign gained momentum, so did the pressure. The media, the public, and even some of his closest allies began to expect more from him. They wanted answers, solutions, results. And while Xavier was proud of the progress they had made, he knew that real change took time. The road ahead would be long and difficult, and there was still much work to be done. One night, as Xavier sat in his office reflecting on the journey, his phone rang. It was a call from Elon Musk. "Xavier," Musk said, his voice brisk but excited. "I've been thinking. We need to take this to the next level. We've got the app, the awareness campaign, it's all coming together. But what if we could create a virtual reality experience for people with severe anxiety or PTSD? A safe space where they could confront their fears in a controlled, supportive environment. We could help them rebuild their confidence and sense of agency." Xavier sat back, stunned. A virtual reality experience for mental health? It was an idea so unconventional that it seemed almost too futuristic to be possible. But knowing Elon Musk, it wasn't far-fetched. "I'm not sure," Xavier said, hesitating. "I mean, virtual reality is powerful, but can it really replace traditional therapy? Isn't there a risk that it could make people more isolated?" "Not if we use it the right way," Musk replied confidently. "The goal isn't to replace therapy, it's to enhance it. VR could be used as a tool in the treatment process. People could practice coping skills in immersive environments, rehearse social interactions, or gradually expose themselves to situations that trigger anxiety, all while being guided by a mental health professional. Xavier thought about it for a moment. It was bold. It was different. And it had the potential to be groundbreaking. If we're going to do this, Xavier said, his voice determined, we need to make sure it's done thoughtfully. We can't just throw people into VR and hope it works. It has to be guided, monitored, and integrated with traditional therapies. Musk agreed. Exactly. We'll work with top mental health professionals to design the program. Let's make sure it's a tool that helps people, not a gimmick. And so, they began working on what would eventually become one of the most innovative aspects of the initiative, a VR-based mental health treatment program that could revolutionize how people with severe anxiety, PTSD, and other mental health issues received care. As Xavier looked out over the city skyline that night, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was just the beginning. Together with Elon Musk and Dr. Hayes, he was helping to shape the future of mental health care, a future where technology and human connection could come together to heal lives. The days flew by in a blur of meetings, brainstorm sessions, and sleepless nights. Xavier felt the weight of the initiative bearing down on him. The momentum they had created was exhilarating, but with it came an avalanche of expectations. As the national mental health campaign grew, so did the pressure to deliver. It was no longer just an idea, it was a movement, and movements required results. The team had spent the last few months developing the mental health app, working with tech experts, mental health professionals, and designers to create something that would truly resonate with users. The goal was clear, to build a platform that not only provided resources but also created a sense of community and support for individuals who might otherwise feel isolated. Elon Musk's idea for incorporating AI into the app had quickly turned from a theoretical concept into a working prototype. The app was designed to gather data from users' behavior, thoughts, and emotions, using AI to provide personalized mental health recommendations and alerts. It could track progress, suggest exercises, and offer therapeutic content tailored to each user's unique needs. But the most groundbreaking feature was the predictive aspect. The AI would monitor users' patterns, how often they used the app, what content they engaged with, and even subtle behavioral cues that indicated shifts in mood or emotional state. When it detected a change, it would suggest timely interventions, whether it was reaching out for support, taking a break, or even scheduling a session with a therapist. Xavier had his doubts. He loved the vision, but he couldn't shake the feeling that technology was a double-edged sword. Could something as impersonal as an algorithm truly understand the depth of a person's emotional struggles? Could it truly help people before they hit rock bottom, or would it just be another tool that failed to live up to its promises? Elon Musk seemed unfazed by these concerns. In fact, he seemed more excited than ever. He had been in constant contact with developers, and the app's beta testing was scheduled for the following week. "We're ready," Elon had told him over the phone just days before the launch. "This is going to change everything." But Xavier's excitement was tempered by his unease. There was so much riding on the app's success, not just for the foundation, but for the millions of people who were counting on them to make a real difference. The last thing he wanted was to see the initiative fail, or worse, become a cautionary tale of overpromising and underdelivering. On the morning of the beta test, Xavier arrived at the headquarters with Dr. Hayes and the rest of the team. The mood was a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Everyone was on edge, knowing that this would be the first real-world test of their combined efforts. The app would go live for a select group of volunteers who had signed up to be part of the beta testing phase. Xavier stood in front of a group of mental health professionals, developers, and data scientists. "This is it," he said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "What we're doing here isn't just about creating an app. It's about changing lives. We're not just using technology for the sake of innovation, we're using it to help people. To save lives." There was a collective nod of agreement. No one was more aware than this team of the stakes. For many of them, this was personal. Many had seen loved ones struggle with mental health, and others had experienced their own battles. The pressure was palpable, but it also fueled their resolve. "We've got one shot to make this right," Dr. Hayes added, her voice calm but firm. "Let's make sure we're doing everything we can to ensure this is more than just a tool. It needs to be a lifeline." After a few more words of encouragement, the team gathered around their computers and smartphones to begin monitoring the progress of the beta testers. It was time to see if the app would live up to its promises. The first feedback came through a few hours later. It was from a user named Emily, a 29-year-old woman who had struggled with anxiety and depression for years. She had been one of the first to sign up for the beta test. "I just wanted to say thank you," Emily wrote in her feedback. "I've been using this app for a few hours, and I feel like someone finally understands what I'm going through. The suggestions are so personalized, and the guided exercises help me breathe through an anxiety attack I was having. I've never felt this supported before." Xavier read the message aloud to the team, and the room filled with a collective sigh of relief. For the first time in months, Xavier allowed himself to smile. This was it. This was the change they had been working toward. Over the next few days, more positive feedback poured in. Testers reported that the AI felt intuitive, and many praised the personalized recommendations. The app's ability to suggest small, manageable steps helped users regain a sense of control over their mental health. Many testers, like Emily, had never experienced anything like it, an app that didn't just provide information but actually helped them take actionable steps toward healing. However, there were also some concerns. A few testers reported feeling overwhelmed by the app's constant prompts, while others found the AI's predictions to be a bit too invasive. Some users wanted more human connection, expressing that they didn't feel ready to rely entirely on an app for their mental health needs. Xavier and Dr. Hayes immediately met to review the feedback. "The positive responses are encouraging," Dr. Hayes said, scrolling through the comments. "But we can't ignore the concerns. Some people feel like they're being watched too closely. We need to balance the AI's interventions with user autonomy." Xavier nodded. "I get it. We're treading a fine line between helpful and invasive. We'll need to adjust the app's settings to give users more control over how much they want the AI to intervene." Elon Musk called later that day, his voice crackling with excitement. "How's it going, Xavier? Are we getting the results we were hoping for?" "We're seeing a lot of positive feedback, but there are also some issues we need to address," Xavier replied. "Some users feel like the app is overstepping, and others want more personal interaction. It's clear that the AI is useful, but we might need to refine its approach." Musk was silent for a moment before responding. "I'm glad we're getting feedback now rather than later. This is the perfect opportunity to make improvements before we scale. Let's keep iterating until we get it just right." Xavier felt a sense of relief. Musk's willingness to adapt and improve was exactly what they needed. This wasn't about getting it perfect on the first try, it was about learning from each iteration and continuously improving. As the days went on, Xavier and his team worked tirelessly to adjust the app, refining the AI's interventions and making the app more customizable for users. The feedback from the beta testers helped them fine-tune the features, ensuring that the app would be as supportive and non-intrusive as possible. Xavier realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he felt confident. The mental health initiative was not just an idea anymore. It was a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving and growing. And with Elon Musk's backing, and the support of countless volunteers and professionals, Xavier was more determined than ever to ensure it succeeded. The feedback from the beta test had been invaluable, and Xavier felt a renewed sense of purpose as the team dove into the next phase of the mental health initiative. The app's AI was being refined, and new features were being added based on user input. The real work, however, had just begun. They had reached a critical point where their product was ready to be scaled, yet Xavier couldn't shake the feeling that they needed to do more, to reach deeper, and to make sure that their mission didn't just change the lives of a few, but the lives of millions. The app was now in the hands of thousands of users who had signed up to be part of the next phase of testing. The initiative's visibility was growing rapidly, thanks in large part to a viral social media campaign that had spread the hashtag #TechForMentalHealth. The hashtag had been embraced by influencers, celebrities, and mental health advocates alike, sparking a global conversation about the importance of mental health and the role technology could play in addressing the crisis. Xavier walked into his office one morning, and his phone immediately buzzed with a series of notifications. The campaign had reached a tipping point. He opened an email from Dr. Hayes. "Xavier, we're seeing a huge spike in app downloads and social media engagement. This thing is growing faster than we anticipated. It's time to start thinking about our next steps." Xavier rubbed his eyes, still adjusting to the early morning light. It felt like everything was happening at once, but there was something invigorating about the pace. The app was more than just a project. It had become a movement, a symbol of hope for people who had once felt forgotten or ignored. He quickly dialed Dr. Hayes' number. "How's everything looking on your end?" he asked. "It's overwhelming," she said, her voice tinged with a mix of excitement and exhaustion. "We're seeing thousands of new sign-ups every day. But we also have to make sure we're ready to handle the scale. The last thing we want is for the app to crash or for people to feel like we're not prepared." Xavier knew she was right. The infrastructure they had built was strong, but with rapid growth came new challenges. They needed to be ready to meet the demand, while also ensuring that the app's core mission, supporting mental health, remained intact. "We're going to need more therapists on board," Xavier said. "And I think we need to get more personal stories involved in the next round of marketing. People don't just want an app. They want to feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves." Dr. Hayes agreed. "We've made a lot of progress, but the real key to sustaining this momentum is going to be community engagement. People need to see that others are using the app, sharing their experiences, and benefiting from it. We can't just sell them a product, we need to create a movement." Over the next few weeks, Xavier and his team worked around the clock to roll out the next phase of the campaign. They enlisted more therapists, integrated live chat support features into the app, and organized virtual support groups for users to connect with one another. They also launched a series of testimonials from people whose lives had been changed by the app, giving faces and names to the statistics. One of the most impactful stories came from Jordan, a 22-year-old college student who had struggled with severe depression and social anxiety for years. In his testimonial, Jordan opened up about his experience using the app and how it had helped him navigate his darkest moments. "I never thought something like an app could help me. I thought I had to go to therapy, or talk to people face to face. But the app gave me a way to start. It helped me take small steps, one at a time. Now, I'm not so afraid to reach out for help," Jordan said in the video. "It's not perfect, but it's the first thing that's really worked for me." Jordan's story struck a chord with millions. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about the connection. It was about someone who, like so many others, had been drowning in silence, only to be thrown a lifeline. The video went viral, and soon, more stories like Jordan's were being shared by app users around the world. The ripple effect was growing, and it was becoming clear that the initiative had become something far more significant than just an app, it had become a lifeline for so many. Xavier watched as the movement spread, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and awe. He knew that the app wasn't the sole solution to the mental health crisis, but it was a powerful tool. And in many ways, it was just the beginning. But with the success also came new challenges. Xavier had received an email that morning from a major tech investor, one that had expressed interest in partnering with the foundation. The investor, a billionaire with ties to both Silicon Valley and the nonprofit world, was impressed by the app's potential and wanted to discuss funding opportunities. At first, Xavier was thrilled. The prospect of more resources could allow them to accelerate the app's development, reach more people, and provide even more support. But then, a darker thought crossed his mind. What did this investor want in return? Was he truly interested in supporting the cause, or was he more interested in the financial potential of the mental health industry? Xavier had seen what happened when money and technology collided in the past. Sometimes the mission got lost in the shuffle. He couldn't let that happen here. He turned to Dr. Hayes, who had been an integral part of the team from the beginning. "What do you think about the offer?" "It could help us scale, but I'm worried about losing sight of our mission," he said. Dr. Hayes thought for a moment before replying. "We need to be careful. We're in a position where our initiative is growing fast, and there's a lot of potential for investment. But we can't let the pressure to scale cloud our purpose. We need to stay grounded, and we need to make sure that the people who benefit from this initiative, the users, remain our top priority." Xavier nodded. "We'll proceed with caution. Let's see what the investor has to say, but we have to be clear about our values from the start." As the team prepared for the meeting with the investor, Xavier's mind raced. The initiative was at a crossroads. On one hand, they had the potential to revolutionize mental health care on a global scale, but on the other hand, they had to protect the core values that had made the project so successful in the first place. He couldn't help but think back to the first conversation with Elon Musk, their shared vision of using technology to break down barriers, to make mental health care accessible, and to ensure that no one had to suffer in silence. That vision had always been bigger than any app or platform. It was about making a real difference in the world. As he prepared for the meeting, Xavier realized that this was just one of many decisions they would face in the coming months. But no matter what, he was determined to keep the mission at the heart of everything they did. The day of the investor meeting had arrived, and Xavier couldn't shake the knot in his stomach. He had always believed in the power of the mental health initiative, but today felt different. Today was the day he would face a crucial decision, one that could change the direction of everything they had worked so hard to build. The ripple effect of their app was undeniable, it had gained traction, and the momentum was palpable. The potential for exponential growth was on the horizon. But with it came the weight of responsibility, and the risk of losing their way. Xavier met Dr. Hayes in the conference room just an hour before the meeting. She could tell by the look on his face that he was anxious. It was hard not to be. This wasn't just about technology, it was about people, about lives that could be transformed or, in the worst-case scenario, harmed if their mission was compromised for the sake of profit. "Are you ready for this?" Dr. Hayes asked gently, her tone reassuring. Xavier nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. "I keep wondering if we're doing the right thing. We've come so far, but if we accept this funding, what happens next? Who do we become?" Dr. Hayes sat down across from him, her gaze unwavering. "We can't let the fear of change stop us. If we believe in what we're doing, we need to take the next step. But we also have to stay true to our values, always. It's not about compromising who we are, it's about leveraging the resources we need to make an even bigger impact." Her words gave Xavier a sense of clarity. He knew she was right. They couldn't afford to let fear guide their decisions. But the stakes were higher than ever. Just then, the door opened, and the investor walked in, Marcus Caldwell, a seasoned venture capitalist who had made a fortune by investing in innovative tech startups. Marcus was known for his sharp business acumen and his ability to spot the next big thing. He was also known for being ruthless when it came to turning a profit. Xavier had done his homework on Caldwell, and while he admired his success, he couldn't ignore the rumors of his aggressive business tactics. "Good to finally meet you, Xavier," Marcus said, his voice smooth and confident as he shook Xavier's hand. "I've been hearing a lot of buzz about your app. It's impressive." Xavier stood tall, trying to mask the tension he felt. "Thank you, Marcus. We're incredibly proud of what we've built, and we're excited about the potential it has to make a real difference in the mental health space." Marcus smiled, sitting down across from them. "I've reviewed your platform, and I see incredible promise. You're hitting a pain point that's becoming more urgent every day. Mental health is a global issue, and the timing couldn't be better. But I think we both know that in order to take this to the next level, you're going to need capital. A lot of it. Xavier braced himself. We've been careful about the kind of investment we're looking for. This isn't just another tech startup. Our mission is to genuinely help people. We don't want to lose sight of that. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Of course, I understand the importance of your mission. But in my experience, mission-driven companies need to grow fast to make an impact. And fast growth requires the kind of funding I can provide. I'm not just offering you money, I'm offering you a partnership. You take this app to millions of users, and you'll be able to reach more people than you ever dreamed of. You'll change the world. Xavier glanced at Dr. Hayes, who gave him a small nod. This was the moment, the fork in the road. If they accepted the funding, it would provide them with the resources they needed to scale quickly, but there was also the risk of losing control over the app's direction. They would have to make compromises. The mission might become secondary to business priorities. Xavier took a deep breath. I appreciate the offer, Marcus, but we've been very intentional about our approach. We don't want to sacrifice the integrity of the app or its purpose. Mental health isn't something we can treat like any other product. People's lives are at stake here. Marcus leaned forward, his expression shifting slightly. I get it, Xavier. You want to protect your values. But let's be real, you can't do this alone. To make the impact you're hoping for, you need resources. You need partnerships that can help you scale. And, most importantly, you need to generate revenue to sustain this long term. We can make that happen. But only if you let go of some of that control. Xavier felt the pressure mounting. The vision they had crafted was so pure, so clear in his mind. But Marcus was right in one aspect, the resources they had now would only get them so far. If they wanted to create lasting change, they needed more than just passion and dedication, they needed the infrastructure, the global reach, and the financial backing to fuel the initiative. But at what cost? I'm not ready to make that decision yet, Xavier said, his voice firm. This is bigger than just an app. It's about the people we're trying to help. I need to think about whether accepting this funding aligns with our values. Marcus smiled, though there was a hint of impatience in his eyes. I understand. But remember, Xavier, time is money. This isn't going to wait forever. If you're serious about making a difference, you'll need to act fast. Think about it, and let me know. As Marcus stood up to leave, Dr. Hayes and Xavier exchanged a quiet glance. This was the decision that would shape the future of their initiative. As the investor left the room, Xavier felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. This wasn't just a business decision, it was a moral one. The path he chose would define not only the future of the mental health initiative but the way they impacted lives on a global scale. Xavier spent the rest of the afternoon in deep thought. He walked around the city, reflecting on what mattered most. It wasn't the technology or the money, it was the people. It always had been. He thought about the stories he had heard, the faces of the users who had shared their struggles and triumphs. Their stories mattered more than any investor's bottom line. As night fell, Xavier returned to his apartment and sat at his desk. His phone buzzed with another message from Dr. Hayes. We're at a crossroads, Xavier. The world is watching. We need to decide where we go from here. Xavier sat back in his chair, feeling the weight of the decision before him. Would they stay true to their mission, no matter the cost? Or would they take the investment and risk losing their way? He closed his eyes and thought about what really mattered. The days following the investor meeting were filled with intense reflection. Xavier couldn't sleep. His mind raced with endless possibilities and the weight of the decision that loomed over him. Each night, he sat at his desk, surrounded by scribbled notes and diagrams, trying to piece together the future of the mental health initiative. The dilemma he faced was not just about funding, it was about the integrity of everything they had worked for. Could they expand without losing their core mission? The mental health initiative had always been about more than just an app. It was about human connection, about offering real help in a world where so many felt alone. It wasn't about selling a product, it was about offering a lifeline to those who needed it the most. And now, with the potential for huge growth and global impact, Xavier had to decide how much of that mission he was willing to compromise to make it happen. The phone call came a few days later. It was from Elon Musk. "Xavier," Elon's voice crackled through the line, calm yet purposeful, "I've been following your progress. It's incredible what you've built with your team. You're doing something very important." Xavier took a deep breath. "Thanks, Elon. That means a lot coming from you." "I've been thinking about our conversation," Elon continued. "I think you're at a crucial juncture. The tech world is filled with opportunities for rapid scaling, but that's a double-edged sword. You have to be careful. The more you grow, the more external pressures you'll face." Xavier leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the desk nervously. "I'm feeling the pressure already. I've had an offer from a major investor. The money would help us scale, but I'm worried about losing sight of why we started this project in the first place." Elon was silent for a moment before responding. "It's easy to get caught up in the idea of growth. But you have to ask yourself, what are you really trying to build? A tech giant, or a true solution to the mental health crisis? They're not the same thing. If you want to make a lasting impact, you can't let the mission be overshadowed by the numbers." Xavier exhaled slowly, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Elon had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of the matter. "That's what I've been grappling with. The idea of losing control. I've spent so much time building this with the team, and I don't want to sacrifice the values that got us here." "Don't," Elon said simply. "It's the values that will make the difference in the long run. You don't need to compromise them to grow. You just need to find the right partners. It's about the bigger picture." Xavier nodded, though he knew that finding the right partners would be no easy task. "But what if we can't find anyone who shares our vision? What if we have to take the money to keep moving forward?" Elon's voice was quiet but firm. "Then you take the money, but you make sure the deal is on your terms. You don't let anyone dictate your mission. It's yours. And if they don't understand that, they're not the right partner." The call ended with Xavier feeling more certain about his direction. It wasn't about rejecting growth or opportunity, it was about ensuring that the mission stayed intact. As he sat back in his chair, the path ahead seemed clearer. They didn't need to rush into a deal. They needed to take the time to find the right partner, the one who truly believed in the cause, not just the profit. A week later, Xavier met with Dr. Hayes again. The team had continued to make strides, improving the app and reaching even more users. But the question of investment still hung over them like a cloud. "Xavier, I've been thinking about what you said last time, Dr. Hayes began, sitting across from him. "This isn't just about the tech. It's about the people. We've always known that, and we can't lose sight of it now." Xavier nodded. "Exactly. We've built something special, and I'm not willing to give that up. I've had some conversations, and I think it's time we start looking for a partner who truly aligns with our mission." Dr. Hayes smiled, a sense of relief in her expression. "I think that's the right move. We can't afford to be distracted by the pressure to scale. We have to be strategic, but we also have to stay grounded in our values. That's what's going to make the difference in the long run." The team spent the next several weeks navigating the delicate process of finding investors who understood and supported their vision. They met with several potential partners, some of whom had the resources and connections to help scale the initiative. But none of them felt right. Some saw the app as just another tech product, something to monetize and sell. Others seemed more interested in the profit margins than in the user's needs. It wasn't until they were introduced to a small but passionate investment group led by a former therapist, Dr. Claire Patel, that things started to click. Dr. Patel had a deep understanding of mental health and a commitment to using technology for good. She and her team were also incredibly strategic, with a strong background in scaling mission-driven projects. After several conversations, Xavier felt confident that they had found the right partner. Dr. Patel and her team understood the importance of protecting the integrity of the app while also providing the resources needed for it to grow. The deal was made. It wasn't a perfect fit at first, but Xavier and Dr. Patel shared a common vision for the future. They agreed on a funding structure that would provide the mental health initiative with the necessary resources to scale, while also ensuring that the core mission remained intact. Xavier, Dr. Hayes, and the team celebrated the deal with a quiet dinner, their minds already turning to the next steps. But this time, it was different. They had found a partner who respected their values, and together, they could change the world. As the initiative continued to grow, so did the stories of lives being transformed. Jordan, the college student who had shared his testimony earlier, reached out to the team with an update. He was now in therapy, actively using the app to track his progress and stay connected with his therapist. "I never thought this could happen for me," he said in his message. "But now I feel like I have a future. I'm not afraid anymore." For Xavier, moments like these were a reminder of why they had started the project in the first place. They weren't just building an app. They were building a movement. A movement that was saving lives. Xavier stood on the balcony of his apartment one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The decision had been made. They had found the right partner, stayed true to their mission, and were now poised for the next phase of their journey. He thought back to that first conversation with Elon Musk, the doubts he had felt, and the choices that had led him here. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. As he looked out over the city, Xavier knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But it was also filled with hope. They were no longer just a tech startup, they were a movement that had the power to change the world, one life at a time. And that, Xavier realized, was the greatest impact of all. The days that followed the partnership announcement felt like a whirlwind. Xavier couldn't quite believe how quickly things were moving. The mental health initiative was no longer a small project in a cramped office, it was now a global endeavor, supported by a passionate team and a partner who understood the bigger picture. They had navigated the uncertainty and risk, and now, they were on the cusp of something truly remarkable. But even as the venture gained momentum, Xavier felt a subtle shift inside him. The pressure to succeed, real, tangible pressure, was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. It was a familiar feeling, but now it came with new stakes. The mission had always been clear in his mind, but as the initiative scaled, the challenge was no longer just about maintaining that clarity. It was about ensuring that the original spirit of the project, the humanity behind it, didn't get lost in the noise of rapid growth. Dr. Patel had become more than just an investor. She was now a trusted advisor, someone who shared Xavier's dedication to the cause. Together, they mapped out a long-term strategy that would allow the app to expand, reaching people from all walks of life, while still maintaining its core values. "Xavier, we've made incredible strides, but we need to think about sustainability," Dr. Patel said one afternoon in a strategy meeting. "The funding we have is going to help us grow, but we need to ensure we're building systems that can support this growth long-term. We can't just focus on getting bigger, we need to focus on getting better." Xavier nodded, his mind already working through the logistical complexities of scaling. The platform had to evolve in a way that would accommodate more users while still providing the same level of personalized care. They needed to enhance the app's functionality without compromising its accessibility. They had to continue to innovate, but with the same dedication to mental health that had driven them from the very beginning. "We're not just adding more features for the sake of it," Xavier said. "Everything we do must support our mission. We can't lose sight of that." The first major milestone came 2 months later, when the app was officially launched in Europe and parts of Asia. The response was overwhelming. Users from diverse backgrounds, many from countries where mental health was still heavily stigmatized, began downloading the app in droves. Testimonials flooded in, stories of people who had never been able to access proper mental health care now finding a lifeline through the app's anonymous, affordable services. One of the most touching messages came from Aisha, a young woman from Pakistan. She had always felt trapped in a culture that silenced mental health struggles, but after downloading the app, she found a therapist who understood her, who listened without judgment. Aisha shared her journey on social media, and within days, her post had been shared by thousands. "I never thought I could ask for help," she wrote. "But this app showed me that I'm not alone. And that's enough to keep going." Stories like Aisha's reminded Xavier why they had started this journey in the first place. The app was no longer just an idea. It was a movement, one that was touching lives across continents. However, with rapid success came the inevitable challenges. As the app expanded internationally, Xavier and his team began to face new cultural barriers. Some regions were more open to digital therapy, while others were hesitant to embrace it. In certain parts of the world, internet access was unreliable, making it difficult for users to benefit from the app's features. In others, there were regulatory hurdles. Different countries had varying laws when it came to online therapy, and navigating those legal landscapes was proving to be more complicated than they had anticipated. Xavier spent countless nights working with legal teams and international experts to ensure that the app complied with every regulation. But the tension was mounting. The demands of scaling, while maintaining a high-quality user experience, were beginning to take their toll on the team. One evening, during a team meeting, Dr. Hayes voiced her concerns. "Xavier, we need to address the elephant in the room. As we expand, we're facing resistance. The legal complexities alone are enough to slow us down, and we can't ignore the fact that some of the regions we're moving into might not be ready for this kind of mental health intervention. How do we reconcile our mission with these barriers?" Xavier stared at the screen in front of him, his mind spinning. He knew Dr. Hayes was right. They were on the verge of something incredible, but they couldn't ignore the growing pains that came with rapid growth. There was a part of him that feared they might be pushing too fast, trying to reach too many people at once, without considering the cultural nuances and logistical challenges of each market. "I think we need to slow down a bit," Xavier said after a long pause. "Maybe we're trying to do too much, too soon. We need to ensure that our expansion is thoughtful, respectful, and sustainable. It's not just about reaching more people, it's about reaching the right people, in the right way." The decision to slow down the global expansion wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Xavier and the team took a step back and re-evaluated their approach. They decided to focus on deepening their impact in the markets where they were already seeing success, ensuring that the app could offer the highest quality care, while also strengthening their partnerships with local organizations and mental health experts. They began developing tailored strategies for different regions, working with local therapists to adapt the platform's services to cultural norms, building partnerships with organizations that could help bridge the digital divide in areas with limited internet access, and aligning with governments and regulatory bodies to ensure they were compliant with international laws. Over time, these adjustments paid off. The app continued to grow, but now at a more sustainable pace. Xavier and the team had learned that true success wasn't about rapid expansion. It was about making a lasting impact, one step at a time. As the sun began to set one evening, Xavier sat in the same spot where he had made so many important decisions. The city below had changed, the world had changed, but something deep within him had remained the same. The mental health initiative was now a global success, but it was still rooted in the same mission that had started it all. Xavier closed his eyes, reflecting on how far they had come, from the initial seed of an idea, to the funding, to the setbacks, to the breakthroughs. He thought about the faces of the users who had shared their stories, the therapists who had dedicated their lives to helping others, and the team who had worked tirelessly to make it all possible. In that quiet moment, Xavier realized that the journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. The months following the decision to slow down the global expansion had proven to be a critical turning point. Xavier, Dr. Hayes, and the rest of the team had poured their energy into refining the app and ensuring that it met the needs of users on a deeper, more meaningful level. They knew they weren't just creating a product, they were cultivating a community, a global network of people connected by their shared struggles and triumphs in the realm of mental health. But even with all their progress, Xavier couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to be done. They had reached so many, but the journey felt far from complete. It was as though something was still missing, a final piece that could bring everything together, elevate the mission to an entirely new level. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and strategic discussions, Xavier found himself standing by the window of his apartment, looking out over the sprawling city below. The sun had just set, casting a warm glow over the horizon, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet accomplishment. Yet, something tugged at him, a sense of urgency that had been growing over the last few weeks. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Patel. "We need to talk. There's something big happening." Xavier immediately called her back, his mind racing with possibilities. When Xavier met Dr. Patel the next morning, she wasted no time getting to the point. "Xavier," she began, "I've been in talks with a few key players in the mental health and tech space. There's a new initiative being launched that could change everything we're doing. It's a collaboration, not just with investors, but with a network of top researchers, mental health professionals, and tech innovators. They're looking for the right partner to lead this effort, and I believe it could be us." Xavier's heart skipped a beat. "Are you saying, we could be part of something bigger?" Dr. Patel nodded. "This isn't just about our app anymore. It's about uniting the brightest minds and the most impactful organizations in the mental health space. We'd be at the forefront of creating a global mental health platform that integrates digital technology, real-world therapy, and unprecedented levels of accessibility. It's about taking the work we've done and magnifying it. But it's also about the kind of responsibility this partnership carries." Xavier paused. The implications were enormous. "I've always believed in the power of collaboration, but this could change the way the world looks at mental health care. It could redefine what it means to provide accessible, meaningful support for people who are struggling." "Exactly," Dr. Patel said, her voice full of conviction. "But we have to be strategic. We have to make sure that we don't lose sight of our values in the process. This is an opportunity to scale our mission exponentially, but only if we do it in a way that remains authentic and patient-centered." Xavier spent the next few days thinking deeply about what this new collaboration could mean for the future. The weight of the decision felt heavier than ever. They had come so far, built so much, and now they were faced with the possibility of taking their work to the next level. But with that opportunity came the risk of losing everything they had worked so hard to preserve. He called Dr. Hayes and the rest of the team together to discuss the opportunity. They gathered in the conference room, a mix of excitement and trepidation in the air. Xavier could see it in their faces. They were all ready for the next chapter, but they were also cautious. "I'm going to be honest with you all," Xavier began. "This is the opportunity we've been working toward. But we have to make sure that as we grow, we don't forget why we started this in the first place. We have always been about the people, about the users who need real help, not just an app. We have to be sure that this collaboration is aligned with that vision." Dr. Hayes spoke up first. "I think we all know what's at stake here. But we also know how much potential we have to help people. This could be the chance to change the world. If we do it right, we can reach millions, if not billions, of people. But it has to be done with integrity." Xavier nodded. "That's exactly what I'm thinking. If we go forward with this, we need to ensure that the mission is never compromised. We need to control our narrative, set clear boundaries, and be uncompromising in our commitment to the people we serve." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone absorbed what Xavier had said. Then, one by one, each team member spoke in support of the decision. They all agreed that the potential impact was too great to ignore, but they also acknowledged the responsibility that came with it. The decision was made. They would move forward with the collaboration, but only on their terms. As the weeks passed, the partnership began to take shape. Xavier, Dr. Patel, Dr. Hayes, and the team worked tirelessly with the new partners, integrating their technology with the latest advancements in mental health research. They developed a comprehensive platform that combined the app with in-person therapy, AI-powered support systems, and a network of community-driven initiatives aimed at tackling mental health on a global scale. The platform quickly became the go-to resource for millions of people worldwide. Users could access personalized care plans, chat with therapists, join support groups, and even take part in virtual wellness programs, all within one seamless platform. The integration of real-world therapy with digital support created a holistic approach that set the platform apart from anything else on the market. And then came the moment Xavier had been waiting for, the official launch of the global initiative. At a press conference held in New York City, Xavier, Dr. Patel, and the team stood before a room full of reporters, mental health advocates, and influencers. The buzz in the room was palpable as the team shared their vision for the future of mental health care. "This platform is more than just an app," Xavier said, his voice steady and confident. "It's a movement to change the way the world thinks about mental health. We're not just providing a service, we're starting a conversation, one that is long overdue. And together, we can create a world where no one has to face their struggles alone." The crowd erupted in applause, and Xavier felt a wave of emotion rush over him. They had done it. They had built something that had the power to change lives, to make an impact that would be felt for generations to come. As Xavier stood on that stage, looking out at the audience, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. The road had been long, filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But every step had been worth it. They had taken a dream and turned it into something real, something that would change the world. In the end, it wasn't about the money, the investors, or the global recognition. It was about the lives they had touched, the people who had found hope, healing, and connection through the work they had done. It was about the legacy they were creating, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Xavier knew the journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But as he stood there, surrounded by his team, he knew one thing for sure. They were ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?